Eli Vaughn jolted awake to a persistent nagging thrum. Less a gentle summons and more an insistent buzz like a highly educated, relentless insect. Cryosleep was meant to be serene, a tranquil coast through suspended animation until the ship's AI politely roused him with a chirpy, "Morning, Captain." Instead, he was hit by a throbbing migraine, as if a star were imploding inside his skull, alongside the unnerving sense that someone was meticulously examining the furthest corners of his awareness. Slowly, against his will, he forced his eyelids apart, half expecting the familiar antiseptic luminescence of the Odyssey Ark's medical bay, with its organized displays and predictable flashing indicators. What he saw instead was a figure poised at the edge of his sight. It was a woman, remarkably tall and slender, her hair flowing down like a torrent of liquid silver. Her ears were elongated and graceful, tapering to delicate points that seemed biologically impossible within the framework of human evolution. She was fixed on him with a knowing smile, as if he'd just delivered the punchline to a private joke. "Eli," she uttered, and his name sounded like a celestial chorus singing a backwards melody. "You've finally rejoined us." He blinked once, twice, then a cautious third time, desperately trying to confirm he hadn't somehow triggered a stasis malfunction that dumped him into an alien delusion. Ma'am," he rasped, his voice rough with sudden terror. "Do I know you?" She tipped her head, the pale light catching the silver strands, and her smile broadened. "You do, Captain. You always have. We've been married for quite some time now, Eli." He froze solid. Married to her? The concept detonated in his mind with the muffled power of a minor nova. I believe there's been a significant error in identification," he managed slowly, striving for composure even as his internal alarm bells shrieked. I've never encountered anyone named or anyone with those particular auricular features, and most definitely not married." Her gaze softened, reflecting a profound depth he wasn't ready to face. "You have," she maintained. "You simply don't recall." She extended a hand toward him, her delicate fingers appearing sculpted from pure light. Eli instinctively flinched away. HAL 9, the ship's AI, chirped in from a nearby wall panel in the medbay, his tone laced with programmed levity. "Commander Vaughn, statistically, the probability of being wed to an individual with elongated auricular appendages is exceptionally low, unless you've secretly subscribed to the alien romance simulation package. Shall I check your billing status?" "Hal, not helpful," Eli groaned. "And trust me, if this is a simulation, the programmer has a truly awful sense of humor." The woman let out a soft laugh, a sound that seemed to undulate through the space like a warm draft in zero gravity. "A simulation? No, I am as authentic as the rhythm in your veins, or perhaps the echoes of it you abandoned." The phrase was poetic, yet frustratingly cryptic. He narrowed his eyes, leaning back against the pod, grasping for some anchor in this surreal reality. "Echoes? Wait. Are you suggesting you somehow remember me?" She nodded. "Everything. Every command, every reckless wager you lost at the Holan Casino on Epsilon Prime. Every Starwine disaster that ruined an ambassador's evening. I remember because I was present and because Her voice became tender. "I have been preserving the fragments of you the cosmos attempted to obliterate." Eli's eyebrow gave an involuntary twitch. "Obliterate me? The universe has been trying to erase me? That's a new development. Last I checked, my primary concern was 237th century taxation." She tilted her head again, a slight knowing laugh playing on her lips. "Time has strange whims, Eli. It sometimes forgets." "I never did." He massaged his temples, trying to force the throbbing headache to make sense of this conundrum. "All right, let's establish the facts. You're my wife. You recall everything about me. I recall nothing about you. And this is somehow a normal occurrence. Did Hal authorize this marriage?" HAL 9 chimed in, utterly missing the irony. "Error. Subject Commander Vaughn possesses no valid marital record. I propose a ceremonial renewal if desired. May I recommend holographic confetti?" Eli groaned, sinking back into the cryopod's padding. "Fantastic. A ghost marriage, and I'm the only person here without the required memories to appreciate it." He scrutinized her again, searching for even a speck of familiarity, a spark that could explain why, despite all logic. A curious ache settled in his chest when she smiled. She didn't push him. She simply watched, her patience a calm, elegant thing. "It will return," she said gently. "In small pieces first, then completely." She paused. Memories are resilient things. They refuse to vanish entirely, especially those linked to the heart. Eli gave a bitter, hollow laugh, the sound echoing faintly off the metal bulkheads. The heart, is it? Wonderful. Just what I needed. A romantic mystery with someone I can't authenticate, marooned on a starship 3 light years from the nearest liquor dispenser. Perfect. Her laughter blended with his, a melodic contrast to his cynicism. For a brief moment, the headache, the alarm, the existential dizziness all faded, replaced by the sheer absurdity of the scene. Fine, he mumbled, finally swinging his legs over the pod's edge. Gravity, or whatever low-power substitute the Odyssey Ark was running, sluggishly pulled him down. If we're married, that implies paperwork, vows, and some sort of alien prenuptial agreement, right? Her smile grew, amusement dancing in her pale, otherworldly eyes. We've already overcome taxes, combat drills, and quantum entanglement. I believe the paperwork can wait. Eli groaned again, yet couldn't suppress a laugh. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe it was the sheer lunacy of it all. Or perhaps, just perhaps, there was something oddly comforting about being completely, bafflingly, unjustifiably married to a woman whose face he was seeing for the very first time. Hal 9, incapable of grasping human subtlety, interjected, Recommendation: I suggest companion baking therapy to fortify marital bonds. Also consider simulated hollow wine. Eli shook his head, rubbing his temples, muttering, This is going to be a very protracted mission. Somewhere in the stellar void, LRA reached out and touched his forearm, a touch that pulsed with a memory he couldn't access yet, and for an instant, the universe seemed to tilt toward the ridiculous and the infinite simultaneously. He looked at her again, her long ears catching the faint light like silver sensor arrays, and whispered to himself, Wife, huh? Well, I suppose I should get used to the idea. In that quiet, surreal moment with the engines thrumming and distant stars twinkling, Eli recognized that whether or not he remembered her, the cosmos had a darkly comic sense of timing and a flair for cosmic irony. The ship vibrated, LRA smiled, and within the complex web of timelines and memory, the first tentative filaments of something akin to trust began to weave between them. Eli spent the first day traversing the Odyssey Ark's passageways, half convinced his mind was playing tricks, half certain he'd stumbled into an elaborate setup. LRA glided near him like a purposeful apparition, leaving behind faint trails of luminescent dust that shimmered in the ship's recycled illumination. She hummed a melody he didn't know, yet it strangely plucked at a deep submerged chord in his consciousness. At one point she stopped humming, cocked her head, and remarked, You're gazing. You always do that when you're trying to ignore something you shouldn't have forgotten. Eli raised his hands in defense. I am not gazing. I'm performing a visual audit for scientific purposes. Yes, science. Hal 9 interjected from the closest panel, his voice clipped with mock authority. Commander, visual audits are not recognized scientific procedure. Please refrain from scrutinizing the assistant humanoid with the auricular extensions. Eli groaned. Hal, I don't think she's an assistant. She's more like a rogue algorithm with remarkably good dental work. LRA chuckled softly, her eyes glinting like remote stellar bodies. I might be more hazardous than an algorithm, Eli, but only if you permit it. Eli frowned. Hazardous, perhaps, but also strangely calming. Her presence slightly warped the environment. Not literally, but the way she navigated a space made him feel lighter, less tethered to the familiar knot of anxiety in his chest. They spent the morning reviewing their supposed shared history, which mainly involved her recounting incidents. A diplomatic fiasco on Cora 7, a terrifyingly close asteroid pass, and a poorly executed practical joke on an admiral. Eli laughed at the sheer outlandishness, though each laugh was underscored by a jolt of discomfort. The narratives felt like memories, yet they weren't his. Hold on a minute, Eli said, rubbing his temples as they crossed the observation deck. You claimed I splattered Starwine on the ambassador. I have zero recollection of that. Are you certain it wasn't a simulation? Hal, verification requested. Hal 9's status lights flickered. Memory logs indicate an event consistent with LRA's anecdotal report. Probability of authenticity, 73.4% dollar. Remaining 26.65% dollar probability of exaggeration for spousal entertainment. Eli muttered. Exaggeration, naturally. That clarifies everything. LRA's laugh followed him down the corridor, gentle and flowing like molten silver seeping through the metal structure. "Eli," she said suddenly, halting and turning to face him. "You're deploying humor as a defense mechanism." "A defense mechanism?" he countered, raising an eyebrow. "I'm attempting to survive a reality where my wife claims we married in a timeline I cannot access. Yes, jokes are my core survival tactic. It succeeds 52% all of the time." LRA's smile was knowing. "You will eventually recall. Fragments initially like scattered light particles rebounding off the walls of your own mind. When it returns, the experience will be both alien and utterly intimate at once." Eli shivered faintly. The engine's resonant thrum and the far-off flicker of stars seemed to amplify her words. "Fantastic," he muttered. "So I'm essentially dating my own amnesia." As the day progressed, Eli began to notice subtler peculiarities. LRA possessed an innate ability to adjust the ship's systems without physical contact. Lights would dim in accordance with her mood. The ambient temperature would shift slightly as she passed, and the minimal gravitational changes seemed to ripple in her wake like a lazy current. She explained this with an air of casual indifference, as if it were the most mundane cosmic fact. "The Ark responds to energy fields," she stated. "Minor adjustments are usually harmless." Eli's response was a dry, sarcastic whistle. "Ah, minor adjustments. How reassuring. Nothing like a little human-level instability to keep life exciting." She laughed, the sound ringing through the deck like delicate crystal chimes. "You truly are hopelessly human sometimes." He grinned in spite of himself. "And you are hopelessly whatever classification you fit. Cosmic mimetic trickster, perhaps." She simply shrugged, brushing a lock of silver hair back. "Labels are tedious. Just call me LRA." Eli watched her hands dance above the holographic screens, patterns of energy responding to her focus, subtle gravity shifts, electromagnetic nudges that were almost imperceptible to anyone else. "So, where does one enroll in the course to move a spaceship without touching it? Should I be concerned that I can't even get my coffee to hover without spilling?" "You'll adapt," she said softly, her tone almost maternal, which was oddly unsettling. "It's about resonance. The Ark vibrates with your own frequency. The deeper your bond, the more compliant it becomes." Eli raised an eyebrow.
"A bond, huh?"
"Does that mean the ship is also flirting with me?" She laughed again, and he felt a brief flash of warmth despite the situation's inherent absurdity. Their conversation was interrupted by the Ark's sudden, sharp shudder as it crossed a weak graviton turbulence field. Eli seized the railing, nearly losing his footing. Note to self: cosmic turbulence does not qualify as a romantic overture. LRA steadied him with a touch so light it was almost non-existent, yet it sent a distinct shiver through him. "The universe has its own brand of humor," she noted with a faint smile. "But don't worry. I've navigated far worse, including your coffee catastrophes." He laughed despite himself. "Ah yes, my legendary coffee incidents, truly the stuff of interstellar myth." As they moved toward the mess hall, LRA recounted more fragments of their past, blending history with something bordering on mythology. A negotiation that devolved into a karaoke contest, a battle on an ice planet that ended with them trapped in a magnetic storm, passing the time by sharing tales. Eli found himself chuckling at the wild stories, yet an undercurrent of anxiety persisted. The memories felt vivid, but they weren't his. They merely teased something buried deep within his consciousness. "Do you ever get weary of recalling everything?" he asked abruptly. "Of carrying all this gut weight?" She tilted her head, her expression softening. "It's not wearisome, not when it concerns you, but it is solitary sometimes, carrying fragments of a life others can't perceive, especially when the one person who matters most forgets." Eli felt a stab of guilt, quickly masked by a joking smirk. "So I'm both the cause of your heartache and your primary entertainment? That's impressively efficient multitasking, I suppose." LRA smiled, a subtle radiance emanating from her skin. "You're stubborn, Eli. I appreciate that." They reached the mess hall, the lights dimming slightly as LRA's energy influenced the Ark's systems. The recycled protein sat unappetizingly on the table, yet her presence seemed to make the room warmer. HAL 9 chimed in, ever the comic relief. "Recommendation: initiate bonding activity. Probability of success 68.3% or. Probability of sarcasm from Commander, 99% dollars." Eli groaned. Hal, you're relentless. Just because the timeline is unstable doesn't mean you need to narrate my love life. LRA chuckled, handing him a nutrient pack with a teasing flourish. Sustenance first. Surviving cosmic anomalies is simpler with calories, or so the humans always inform me. Eli tore open the package, grimacing.
Yes.
Human sustenance. Chewy, tasteless, and somehow morally ambiguous. They ate in comfortable silence, the vast nebula outside casting shifting shadows. LRA then leaned closer, her voice dropping. Eli, there's something I haven't disclosed yet. Something critical. He raised an eyebrow. Critical, you say? That sounds promising. Should I prepare for existential annihilation or merely minor temporal inconvenience? She smiled faintly, enigmatically. Both, in a sense. But it mainly concerns who you were, and who you are in the process of becoming again. Eli groaned, rubbing his forehead. Great. I hadn't even finished digesting my last identity crisis, and now you're serving me another. Is this a cosmic buffet? It's intricate, LRA admitted, her finger tracing the console, sending a faint energy ripple across the holograms. Your memories aren't simply missing. They are scattered across the timelines. Pieces of you exist in parallel realities, and some of those pieces recall things differently. I've been trying to guide you back to the complete picture, but the procedure is inherently imperfect. Eli leaned back, exhaling slowly. Scattered across timelines. Scattered timelines, parallel versions of myself. This officially exceeds my salary bracket, Eli said, trying to summon his usual wit. Is there hazard pay for existential bewilderment? You already receive it, she replied, a subtle shimmer in her eyes. Every day you endure, every laugh, every joke you create, that is your hazard pay. Eli shook his head, a smile forcing its way through the gravity of her statement. Unbelievable. So I'm hitched to my amnesia, navigating quantum turmoil, and collecting invisible wages. Charming. LRA reached across the table, her fingers gently brushing his hand. And yet you persist. Curious, defiant, alive, and perhaps starting to retrieve those memories. One shard at a time. Eli met her gaze, the nebula's faint light dancing in her eyes, and quietly agreed. One fragment at a time, is it? All right, I'll comply. Hal 9, totally ignorant of the delicate moment, interjected. Recommendation. Suggest morale enhancement activity. Probability of success 82.1%. Probability of commanding officer's sarcasm still 99.9%. Eli groaned. Hal, seriously, why don't you go drift into the next timeline for a while? LRA laughed softly, the sound weaving a thread of warmth through the Ark's cold metallic structure for the first time since Eli awoke. He felt that fragile but undeniable thread of trust begin to stitch itself into the empty spaces of his memory, a promise that even amid fractured realities, connection, absurd, perilous, and beautiful, was still attainable. The Ark's corridors carried the faint scent of ionized metal and reprocessed air, a smell Eli associated with either high adventure or mild physical discomfort. Curiosity propelled him toward the aft sector. LRA had left, citing the need to check energy fluctuations, which he suspected was simply her latest excuse to subtly demonstrate her control over the ship's systems. Eli didn't mind. He felt a strange blend of apprehension and fascination for this woman, who insisted she was his spouse from a past his mind stubbornly rejected. Hal 9's voice cut through the background hum. Commander, scanners detect a previously unidentified laboratory compartment in Section 12B. Recommendation. Investigate for potential narrative development and/or an existential emergency. Probability of intrigue 94.7%. Eli sighed. Wonderful. Another surprise lab. Just what I needed. Could I get a courtesy warning next time? The lab door hissed open, revealing a chamber that smelled faintly of ozone and disinfectant. Vials glowed under gentle panels suspended by magnetic fields. Tiny planetary systems in a miniature galaxy. Eli's eyes immediately caught the labels. Project Aurora, Neural Resonance Trials, Subject 0, Vaughn, Eli. The notations made his gut clench. Wait, he stammered. My name is literally written on these blood samples. A sudden movement behind him caused him to spin around. LRA emerged from the gloom, her long ears brushing against the lab's equipment, her eyes luminous in the dim light. You discovered it, she said softly, almost reverently. I wasn't sure you would. Eli's mind struggled to catch up. Discovered what? LRA? Why is my blood floating in space like a cosmic art installation? She stepped closer, her fingers hovering near the vials but not touching. It's not mere blood. It contains fragments of your memories. It's part of the experiment. Part of us? Us? Eli repeated, his voice wavering with disbelief and growing panic. You're saying my memories are floating in test tubes and you're the one looking after them? She nodded, her expression softening. When the Aurora project failed, your consciousness shattered, pieces of you scattered across the timelines. Some of those pieces didn't survive. I preserved what I could. I carry them with me. Eli ran his hands over his face, desperately seeking an anchor in reality. So my wife is essentially a living external hard drive for my own history? That's endearing in a terrifying cosmic kind of way. LRA's laugh was quiet and melodic. It sounds worse than it is. I never harmed you. You are alive because I maintain your core essence, the fragments of what we were. But you don't recall, not completely. And that's why it's confusing, I know. I've witnessed your struggle. Eli stumbled back toward a console, gripping it for support. Struggle? You're telling me my mind was a fractured mirror, and you've been reassembling the shards, and I'm supposed to feel grateful, not utterly panic-stricken. Brilliant, marvelous, cosmic efficiency at its peak. You can thank me later, she said, her lips twitching with amusement. First, you need to grasp this. I'm no longer entirely human. Eli blinked. Not entirely what? Her fingers lightly grazed one of the floating vials. I have ascended. The process we experimented with, it wasn't just neural resonance. It altered me. I don't sustain myself on blood but on memory, not to cause harm but to conserve, to safeguard the fragments that the universe might otherwise wipe clean. Eli laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. Of course, I awakened to find I'm married to a vampire who consumes memories instead of plasma. This is exactly the brand of sci-fi disaster I signed up for. She moved closer, her hand gently brushing his arm. I didn't take you, Eli. I rescued you, that's all. And if I hadn't... Her voice caught, then steadied. If I hadn't, none of this would exist. Neither of us. Eli's heart pounded with an urgency he couldn't rationalize. There was a weight of truth in her words, yet also an underlying humor, as if the universe itself was winking at their absurdity. So to clarify, you are my vampire memory guardian. I am a walking anthology of experimental fragments, and somehow we are married. Somehow, she agreed, a faint smile flickering across her pale face. And somehow I know you better than you currently know yourself. He shook his head, trying to articulate the ridiculousness. I should probably be panicking, right? Full-blown end-of-days existential terror. Instead, I feel this weird mix of comforted, terrified, and slightly stimulated by your aura thing. LRA chuckled, a low, shimmering sound that resonated in his chest. It's fine. That is normal. Confusion, fascination, fear, they frequently arrive bundled together. Eli walked among the suspended vials, careful not to touch them, staring at the fragments of his own life floating in luminescent plasma. He caught flashes of moments he had never consciously experienced, but that now seeped into his dreams. A kiss under a nebula, laughter in a med bay, arguments over ship protocol, borrowed memories yet somehow woven into his being. Hal 9's cheerful voice broke the tense silence. Commander, recommend mindfulness meditation to resolve cognitive dissonance. Probability of success 42%. Probability of commanding officer's sarcasm 100%. Hal, go be a goat in a parallel dimension. Eli groaned. I need to focus on not losing my sanity. LRA reached for his hand again, a gentle pressure that anchored him. You won't lose it. Not while we are together. You just need to remember at your own tempo. He looked at her, her long ears catching the lab light, her eyes luminous with secrets and quiet resolve, and whispered, All right, I'll try, even if it's terrifying, absurd, and probably illegal in multiple temporal jurisdictions. Somewhere amid the Ark's hum, the floating vials and the echoes of unreconciled timelines, Eli realized that the woman before him, the alien, the memory keeper, wasn't merely a puzzle. She was a tether to something he hadn't known he'd lost, a chance to become whole again, even if it meant being composed of pieces scattered across the stars. The Ark gave a gentle systemic shudder, less an alarm, more a subtle mechanical cough. yet it carried the unmistakable prelude of impending disaster. Eli felt it through his boots, the vibration running up his legs, and he glanced at LRA. She stood perfectly still, her long ears angled forward as if listening to the timbre of reality itself, shifting. "Something is occurring," she said softly, her voice smooth but with a sharp edge of tension. Eli rubbed his temples, his usual sarcasm feeling inadequate against the creeping sense of dread. "I sense it too," he admitted. "The air feels wrong. Or maybe that's just Hal being overly dramatic about cosmic events again." Hal 9 chirped in, utterly unfazed. "Temporal anomaly confirmed. Probability of a minor existential crisis 92.3% R. Recommendation: maintain calm and continue orbiting. Also consider issuing marriage counseling vouchers to involved parties." Eli groaned. "Hal, go invent a new sense of humor elsewhere. This is not the moment for jokes." LRA's focus remained fixed on the observation viewport, where the distant stars began to contort unnaturally. Light was bending and fracturing across the glass, streamers of color rippling like oil across water. "The timelines are merging," she murmured. "Your fragments are intersecting. If we aren't precise, one version of you may simply cease to exist." Eli's coping mechanism, humor, kicked in, though his voice was noticeably unsteady. "Wonderful. So I'm not only married to a virtual stranger, but I might also dematerialize at the most cosmically inconvenient moment. Fantastic. Can we at least select a timeline where I vanish with a full mug of coffee?" LRA smiled faintly, a mix of sympathy and amusement. "You'll manage, probably. We just need to guide the fragments into confluence." She moved closer, her hand brushing his. The subtle energy she radiated seemed to hum in sync with the temporal flux outside, a resonance Eli felt pressing gently against his chest. "Trust me," she said. He shook his head, slowly exhaling. "Trust. Right. Let me just mentally accept the idea of trusting a vampire alien spouse who insists she knows me better than I know myself. Sounds perfectly rational," LRA chuckled. "You will survive and you will learn. That is the point." As the Ark plunged deeper into the anomaly, the internal lights began to strobe, accompanied by subtle vibrations in the hull. Panels shimmered, projecting ghostly echoes of past occurrences. Scenes of Eli making forgotten decisions, conversations with LRA that might or might not have happened. His reflection in the viewport multiplied, a dozen Elis staring back, each with subtly different expressions of panic, amusement, and confusion. Hal 9, surprisingly monotone, offered commentary. Recommendation: do not attempt to engage in conversation with yourself in triplicate. Probability of identity confusion, high. Probability of humorous commentary from Commander, $100%. Eli groaned. Yes, brilliant. I'm officially trapped in a cosmic sitcom, starring multiple versions of myself, a vampiric alien wife, and an AI whose comedic timing is sharper than any particle beam. LRA placed her hand firmly on his shoulder, grounding him with the strange resonance of her energy. "This is why we must synchronize your fragments. Each version of you holds pieces of memory, emotion, and us. If we fail to bring them together, some part of you may vanish indefinitely." He swallowed hard. Vanishing sounds so final. Could we not say temporarily misplaced? Out for a coffee break? I'd process this better with a coffee analogy. She laughed softly. "I can't promise coffee, but I can promise you won't be erased." "Not completely." The Ark groaned as the turbulence of fractured spacetime pressed against its hull. Eli gripped the nearest rail. "So what's the strategy? Just cuddle the timelines until they behave?" "Something like that," she admitted. "We must penetrate the core of the anomaly, the wormhole's center. That's where the temporal currents are weakest. We synchronize our resonance there. It requires precision, confidence, and a willingness to confront yourself." Eli's mouth went dry. "Confront myself? I'm already married to a woman I barely know, and now I have to meet myself? Multiple times? And you're calm?" "I am always calm," LRA stated, though the slight tension in her eyes contradicted her words. Mostly. They entered the navigation chamber where the Ark's controls glowed with pale blue light. LRA's hands hovered above the panels, adjusting energy fields with subtle gestures. Eli followed her lead, mirroring her hand positions even though he had no clue what he was doing. Miraculously, the ship responded, stabilizing slightly as the temporal currents lashed at the hull like playful tentacles. "Excellent," she murmured, watching him closely. "You're sinking faster than expected. Your fragments are responding." Eli let out a shaky laugh. "Responding?" "Right. I feel like a human trying to tune a starship like a piano, and the piano could potentially consume me if I hit a wrong key." She smiled faintly. "Then we'll strike the right chord together." Time warped around them, flickering in rhythm with their movements. The arc trembled, lights bending in surreal arcs, and Eli felt the fragmented versions of himself brushing the edges of his mind. One confident, one fearful, one still full of sarcastic defiance. With LRA guiding him, he reached inward, acknowledging each fragment, allowing them to coalesce like puzzle pieces. Hal 9's voice for once was oddly subdued. "Commander, probability of complete temporal cohesion, 72.8%. Probability of sarcastic remark from Commander, 97.6%. Eli groaned, but a small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Well, Hal, that is a significant improvement over previous projections." The ship stabilized, the light refracting normally, the stars outside resuming their familiar shimmer. LRA's hand remained on his shoulder, steadying him. "It is accomplished," she said softly. "Your fragments, you are whole again, at least enough to survive. But the memories will return slowly. Patience, Eli, one piece at a time." He nodded, still catching his breath. "Slowly is good. I've had sufficient excitement for a lifetime. Can we perhaps take a break before the universe decides to prank me again?" She laughed, a soft sound that threaded through the Ark's engines. "Yes, a break for now." As the stars stretched into the distance, Eli realized that surviving multiple timelines, temporal fractures, and a memory-keeping alien spouse wasn't just about courage. It was about humor, patience, and learning to trust someone who remembered everything he didn't, even if it meant laughing while teetering on the edge of cosmic absurdity. The wormhole gaped ahead like an immense, hungry maw, stretching across the void with swirling colors that defied every known spectrum, twisting light into impossible knots. Eli peered through the viewport, feeling a shiver that was equal parts awe and existential dread. "So, we're just diving into it like a cosmic swimming pool?" he asked, his voice tight but seasoned with nervous humor. LRA stood beside him, her long ears catching stray ribbons of luminescence, her eyes calm and utterly focused, despite the chaos outside. "It is the only route," she said softly. "We cannot stabilize the Ark externally. The temporal currents are weakest precisely at the center. That is where the timelines overlap the least." Eli ran a hand through his hair, trying to ground himself in the situation's inherent ridiculousness. "Right. So I'm supposed to rely on my vampire alien wife and a ship with mood swings, and hope we don't disintegrate into quantum confetti." She laughed, a soft musical sound that seemed to ripple through the cockpit. "Not confetti," she corrected. "More like quantum glitter. Much harder to clean up if it gets everywhere." The Ark shuddered as they crossed the event horizon of the wormhole. Lights bent and distorted, panels flickering in a kaleidoscope of fractured color. Eli gripped the nearest rail, his heart pounding while ghostly echoes of alternate selves, fragments from other realities, brushed against the edges of his consciousness. LRA's presence anchored him, a steady resonance that pulled the fragments into focus. "Breathe, Eli," she said, her hand remaining on his shoulder. "You need to sync with the Ark, with me." "With yourself," he exhaled shakily. "Sync, I'll attempt it. But if one of my alternate reality selves starts heckling me, I'm assigning the blame to you." She smiled faintly. "That is half the enjoyment." The Ark twisted through the wormhole like a ship being poured through a narrow funnel. LRA moved with fluid grace among the control panels, her fingers tracing delicate patterns in the air, bending energy and resonance around them like a sculptor shaping water. "Concentrate on the fragments," she instructed. "See them as components of yourself, not threats. Each carries a memory, a strength, a reason for being. Allow them to fold back into you." Eli closed his eyes, letting the panic subside as he focused. He felt the spectral presences brush against his awareness, whispered shards of memory slipping into his mind. The kiss under the nebula, the laughter in the zero-gravity corridor, the procedural arguments, all foreign yet gradually becoming familiar, stitching themselves back together into something that felt whole. Hal 9's voice, unnervingly upbeat, broke through. "Commander, Probability of temporal synchronization, 83.6th percentile. Probability of sarcastic remark from Commander, 99.2%. Recommendation, savor the existential ride. Eli muttered, I despise the fact that you're always statistically correct. LRA's laughter softened the edges of his fear. For a moment, the twisting chaos of the wormhole felt strangely beautiful. The Ark responded to her subtle guidance, its hull flexing and yielding with the currents, its engines humming in harmony with her directed energy. Almost there, she murmured. Hold on, this phase is delicate. The ship shook violently, fragments of reality pressing hard against the hull. Eli tightened his grip, sweat running down his temples. He caught glimpses of alternate Elis flickering in and out of view, some shouting, some laughing, some waving as if to say, keep it together. He swallowed, focusing on LRA's steady presence, the warmth of her hand grounding him amidst the madness. Merge with me, she whispered. Release the fear. Allow the timelines to fold together. Eli inhaled deeply, surrendering to his trust in her. He felt the fragments of himself, every version, every echo, begin to coalesce into a single continuity. The chaos around them subsided into a symphony, colors stabilizing, lights returning to a harmonious glow. He felt whole. Not perfectly, but enough to survive, to breathe, to look at LRA and see clarity. Hal 9's voice sounded oddly subdued. Commander, temporal coherence achieved. Probability of catastrophic collapse reduced to 14.2 %. Probability of sarcastic remark from Commander still very high. Eli chuckled weakly. Yeah, keep tracking that. I'm preoccupied with not exploding into a timeline salad. LRA smiled, her fingers lightly brushing his arm. You did it, she said softly. We did it. Eli shook his head, still processing the enormity of the event. We nearly perished inside a kaleidoscope of infinity. And you call that teamwork? I suppose that's matrimony in a cosmic nutshell, Eli conceded. LRA chuckled, the sound infusing the Ark's cold metal with warmth. Something like that. Absurd, terrifying, and strangely reassuring. The Ark stabilized completely. Drifting through the calm nucleus of the wormhole, Eli permitted himself to relax, the tension draining from his shoulders. He looked at LRA, her eyes mirroring the swirling stars outside, and whispered, I think I understand a little more now. Not everything, but enough to trust that we'll survive the next ridiculous scenario the universe throws at us. LRA's smile was gentle, almost expressing pride. Trust is the genesis, she said. The rest will follow. Memories, fragments, time, even love, all in their proper rhythm. Eli leaned back, allowing the Ark's deep hum to soothe him. For the first time since awakening, he experienced a fragile sense of completion, woven together not just from memory fragments but from the improbable, inexplicable bond that tied him to a woman he barely remembered yet couldn't stop trusting. In that moment, as the wormhole stretched infinitely around them, twisting stars and possibilities into spectacular patterns, Eli realized that survival wasn't simply about physics, bravery, or cosmic chance. It was about humor, faith, and the improbable, profound core of connection LRA had painstakingly cultivated across timelines, waiting for him to finally catch up. The Ark glided through the brilliantly lit expanse beyond the wormhole, the stars trailing out in long, silent streaks like silver threads on black velvet. Eli stood at the observation deck, arms folded, trying to process the stillness following the storm of timelines and cosmic chaos. It was a moment of rare peace, almost too profound to simply breathe through. LRA joined him, moving with silent grace, her long ears catching the scattered light like delicate prisms. Do you ever get exhausted by space's need for drama? Eli asked, his voice low, though still edged with his characteristic humor. I mean, one minute you're marrying me amidst a memory collapse, the next we're inside a kaleidoscopic wormhole. Can we ever just have a routine flight? LRA smiled faintly, a curve of her lips that seemed to soften the surrounding void. Routine is a subjective concept, she said, her tone gently teasing. Besides, routine would be dull. I suspect you secretly enjoy the upheaval. Eli raised an eyebrow. Secretly? I think publicly is a more accurate descriptor. I thrive on cosmic terror disguised as thrilling adventure. Her laughter was a soft ripple, and Eli felt a portion of his residual tension dissolve. You are genuinely incorrigible, she murmured. And you are absurdly effective at making me feel like I should be terrified, yet somehow totally secure, he retorted. They walked together toward the central control hub, the Ark vibrating rhythmically under their steps, the faint pulsation synchronized with LRA's subtle energy field. HAL 9 cheerfully piped up ever the persistent observer. Commander, recommend a light-hearted post-crisis activity. Probability of improved morale, 88.7%. Suggested activities: zero-gravity juggling, humorous negotiation with the AI, or complimenting your alien spouse. Eli groaned. Hal, you are relentless. I just survived a timeline collapse, remember? I believe my morale has earned a brief period of non-engagement. LRA's smile deepened. Perhaps Hal is correct. Even in chaos, there is room for levity. They reached the central deck where the holographic trajectory map shimmered in soft blue. LRA paused, placing a hand on Eli's arm. Eli, the anomalies we faced were only the beginning. The universe tends to challenge what it holds most valuable. You, me, and the temporal fragments that bind us. It was delicate. But we survived. Not flawlessly, not without confusion, but together. Eli looked at her, noticing the subtle luminescence of her aura as she spoke, the way her energy seemed to merge with the ship's structure. Together, huh? So if we're doing this whole timeline remerge thing again, you're my cosmic chaperone. Something like that, she said softly. And this time you will not be alone in navigating the fragments. The lights flickered slightly as the Ark adjusted its course, the subtle hum vibrating through the hull. Eli felt an echo in his mind, a fleeting memory of a laugh he couldn't identify, a warmth he couldn't name. It feels bizarre, he said, his voice quiet. I feel like I recall pieces of us. Not entirely, but enough. I'm unsure whether to panic or be impressed. LRA reached out, her hand brushing his. You don't need to decide yet. Memory is not linear. It's fragments, echoes, resonances. You will remember everything in due course, and some things you will perhaps never be allowed to forget. Eli's lips twisted into a half grin. So fundamentally, I'm dating my own amnesia again, but with an element of cosmic romance thrown in. Magnificent. She laughed softly, the sound weaving warmth through the metallic deck. You adapt rapidly. That is why I have always believed in you. He shook his head, chuckling despite himself. Believe in me? That's rich. I barely trust myself to make a proper coffee, and somehow I survived a kaleidoscope of timelines. Precisely, LRA said, her tone light and teasing. If you can survive yourself, you can survive anything. HAL 9 interjected, oblivious to the intimacy. Commander, suggest minor celebration protocol. Probability of increased happiness, 91.4%. Recommended activity. Creation of humorous memory logs with spouse assistance. Eli groaned dramatically. Hal, stop destroying the moment with efficiency. Allow me to savor the sheer absurdity of surviving a temporal collapse without your running commentary. LRA laughed, and Eli realized that despite the anomalies, the fractured memories, and the terrifying uncertainties, this moment was real, grounded, fragile, and uniquely their own. He allowed himself to relax, feeling the weight of the timeline settle into a cohesive whole. Eli, she said softly, her hand still resting on his. I know it has been confusing, terrifying even, but I promise I will remain with you. Through memory, through time, through everything. And perhaps that is what marriage truly is, commitment beyond certainty. He looked into her eyes, the long ears framing her luminous face, and for the first time since waking, he felt a strange certainty amid the chaos. Commitment beyond certainty. That sounds exactly like us, he whispered. All right then. I'm willing to proceed. One fragment, one absurd moment at a time. Her smile broadened, a blend of relief and amusement. That is all I request. The Ark glided through the starry void, the hum of its engines a gentle heartbeat beneath them. Eli stood beside LRA, hand in hand as the stars outside stretched infinitely, the past and future converging into a singular quiet present. And though the universe remained unpredictable, chaotic, and occasionally terrifying, he realized something profound. Survival was not just about timelines, memories, or cosmic anomalies. It was about trust, humor, and the unshakable bond that could emerge even when reality itself seemed fractured. The Ark drifted in the still aftermath of the chaos, engines humming steadily as the stars outside flowed past in slow, measured streaks of light. Eli leaned against the observation viewport, his long fingers tracing the glass edge as he watched the distant nebula shimmer like spilled paint across the void. The wormhole, the anomalies, the fragments of his alternate selves, they all felt distant now, as if he had weathered a violent storm and emerged into a quiet, reflective dawn. LRA stood beside him, her long ears catching the stray starlight, her eyes luminous but calm, radiating the subtle energy that had guided him through everything. "You've been unusually quiet," she said, her voice soft and teasing, yet tinged with the gravity of their ordeal. Eli exhaled, the sound carrying both relief and the lingering remnants of disbelief. "Quietly processing the fact that I survived a cosmic kaleidoscope of myself, married an alien vampire or something close enough, and didn't internally combust," he replied, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "It's peaceful in a terrifyingly gratifying way." LRA chuckled, the sound weaving warmth through the Ark's quiet metal. "Terrifyingly gratifying is precisely the state I had hoped you would achieve." Eli shook his head, letting a genuine grin settle on his face. "I've fundamentally changed, LRA. I perceive things differently now. I used to think survival meant maintaining a low profile and avoiding risk. Now I recognize that survival is about trust, about welcoming the chaos, about laughing in the face of cosmic absurdity, and perhaps, just perhaps, it's about being courageous enough to hold someone else's hand while reality attempts to consume you whole." She reached for his hand, her long fingers intertwining with his, and he felt the familiar resonance of her energy thread through his very being. "You have matured, Eli," she said softly. "I witnessed it in the wormhole, in the fragments of yourself you reclaimed. You learned to face yourself, all versions of yourself, and coalesce them, and you achieved it with humor, bravery, and heart." He raised an eyebrow. "Heart, huh? I thought I was simply trying not to weep in zero gravity while my alternate selves ridiculed me." LRA laughed, shaking her head. "That is heart, courage infused with absurdity. Precisely what makes you, you." The Ark systems hummed a soft, comforting tune, almost as if the ship itself were breathing a sigh of relief. The floating vials that once held fragments of his scattered memories now hovered dormant in the lab, harmless and stable. He remembered them, the sensation of pieces of himself brushing against his consciousness, demanding recognition, and he realized he no longer feared them. They were part of him, stitched together by choice, by trust, and by the quiet, patient presence of LRA. Hal 9's chipper voice broke through, carefully modulated to avoid inducing panic. "Commander recommends celebratory protocol. Probability of happiness increase, 93.5%. Suggested activity: humorous recollection of past anomalies with spouse or gentle zero-gravity dance. Also, compliments to spouse remain statistically advisable." Eli groaned dramatically. "Hal, you are insufferable, but fine. Let's indulge you." He turned to LRA, a wry grin on his face. "Recall the coffee catastrophe of Aerithros 7, or the time we inadvertently sent the ambassador into a microgravity spin while attempting to negotiate a peace treaty? Good times, weren't they?" LRA laughed, a light musical sound that danced through the control deck. "I recall. I also remember how fiercely stubborn you were, refusing to let go, even when the temporal currents tried to tear you apart." Eli shrugged, smiling, a mix of slight embarrassment and deep pride. "Stubbornness has always been my superpower, and apparently it's also the key to surviving temporal collapse with your alien vampire spouse." She smiled faintly, her eyes softening. "And I would do it again. Every timeline, every fragment. You are worth it." He shook his head, laughter escaping despite the lingering awe of their journey. "Worth it, LRA. You preserved my entire identity across fractured realities, prevented me from evaporating into cosmic absurdity, and somehow still make me laugh. I'd say that is quite a lot to live up to." "Perhaps," she said, her hands gently squeezing his. "But that is the essence of it. Life, love, it is about choosing to navigate the impossible together." They walked to the observation deck, the stars stretching endlessly, and Eli felt something he hadn't experienced since waking aboard the Ark, a sense of complete, fragile, astonishing peace. The fragmented timelines, the fractured memories, the crises and anomalies, all of it had taught him one essential truth. Survival was not just about enduring chaos. It was about embracing it with courage, humor, and trust. He glanced at LRA, the alien energy around her soft and steady, and whispered, "You know, I never expected to feel whole again. But here I am. And you make it possible. LRA smiled, leaning slightly into him, her voice soft. And you make it worth it, Eli. Every day, every moment, every absurd fragment. The Ark glided silently through the cosmos, a quiet sentinel in the vast, unending void. Eli stood beside LRA, hand in hand, the weight of past chaos settling into a steady rhythm of possibility and hope. He realized that growth wasn't always dramatic. It could be quiet, subtle, stitched together by trust, laughter, and resilience. In that moment, he understood fully. They had survived not just due to bravery or intelligence, but because they had chosen to face impossibility together. Memory fragments or not, alternate selves or not, they were bound by something stronger than circumstance. Connection, trust, and the improbable certainty of shared existence. Eli laughed softly, the sound echoing gently across the observation deck. Well, LRA, I guess we truly did survive everything, and somehow I don't entirely hate it. She chuckled, resting her head lightly against his shoulder, her long ears brushing the edge of the viewport. Neither do I, Eli. Neither do I. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Eli felt truly anchored. Not to memory, not to time, not even to reality itself, but to her, and that, he realized, was enough.